What do CEOs need to know about sales these days? A lot. Outdated sales strategies and tactics plague most companies today. Listen to what innovative CEOs and experts have to say about how to change all that with Sales Talk for CEOs. Welcome to Sales Talk for CEOs. Today's guest was working for a smaller company that got acquired by a company many of us have heard of called Angie's List. And after spending 6 years there and helping take the company from 1 million to 1.5 billion, he recognized that he really didn't like working for a large public company, and he yearned for those days of working for a smaller startup. So he started Regal IO. Welcome to the show, Alex.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it's a beautiful day here in Reno, and I understand you're in Colorado today as well. I hope the sun is shining.
Yeah, fortunately or unfortunately, it snowed 4 inches yesterday, so there's snow on the ground again, but that's okay. We roll with it.
Last Saturday it snowed here too. Spring in the mountains. That's all I can say. That's
Yeah.
spring in the mountains. So great to have you here. Let's start by having you tell everyone a little bit about what Regal.io does.
Sure. Taking sort of a bigger step back, a lot of what we do came out of my experience at Angie's List before this. We thought we were building, the digital version of home services where you'd never talk to a human being again, and it's all going to happen online. And, to some extent we did. Millions of people now come to Home Advisor and Angie's List and Handy and these different sites we own or owned. The challenge was in things like, buying a fence installation or a remodel. People were nervous about doing it online. And we saw that in lower conversion rates than traditionally offline. And so we really struggled for years trying to figure out how to get people to actually buy those services and how to create a good customer experience online to build that trust. Never really cracked that nut. And ultimately what worked was actually talking with the customer, which seems antithetical to like what you hear about in like retail as an example. But, in home services, it was critical. We saw that if we had a conversation with a customer, conversion rates went right back up. We helped them, understand the reputation of Angie's List. We helped them disambiguate some of the difficult things that were going on, deal with the emotional complexities of, do I really want to do this remodel? And it really worked. So our challenge was, we had a team of 5,000 people doing this human to human thing, but the tools in contact center software were not made for proactively engaging customers. In fact, they were made for deflect, like don't talk to me, like go away. So we really struggled. And when we went to the big contact center companies and asked them to build tools for outbound, they told us we were crazy. And they said, this is, phone is going away. Outbound is not a thing. Customers don't want this. Bye. And, we just structurally knew they were wrong. And as we talked to more friends in other considered industries like, healthcare, financial services, education, we saw that they were feeling a similar trend, that there might be a retail playbook where you don't talk to your customer, but then there's these industries where you actually have to engage with them, even if it's a digital experience. And so Regal was founded with that basic concept of how do we know everything about that customer? So what pages they're going to, what home they live in, what they've said to us in the past as a brand, and use it to figure out when we should be reaching out with what message, and what channel to drive ultimately the best experience for that customer and more revenue for us as a company. So, Regal today works for brands like AAA, for instance, on the insurance side, where they're constantly trying to build better member experiences and reach out and help you get the services you need from them. And especially if you do actually break down the side of the road, they need to be able to reach you. Like if you're not answering that call, it's problematic. To, people in education who are, helping shift education online, but are still figuring out how to get people over that emotional decision, to companies and local services similar to Angie, where, I was just talking with a brand yesterday where they were telling me that, they doubled their sales year over year online by switching to Regal. So, they have big contact centers. They're already trying to reach customers. It's not that they're not trying to do it, but the technology and data strategy that they had before was prohibiting them from doing what they wanted. So ultimately, we are lucky, we're in this sort of very high growth niche, and there's not that many other players that can do what we do. So that's a good position for us to be in.
Well, so fascinating that you say, "Oh, people just need to talk to people sometimes," right?
Sometimes.
We're all right, we're all trying to go digital, and yeah, I love a digital experience too. What I hate is a bot that can't answer my question. They can only feed me links to pages where I can figure it out myself, right? And I think having that human to human contact when you need it is so important for buyers today, whether it's business to business or business to consumer.
Yeah.
So interesting that here you are, and this is a way a lot of founders start, right? They're at another company doing something, and there's a problem that needs to be solved that no one else seems to want to solve because they don't really thoroughly understand it. So you're working along, and you see this need. How did you actually decide, all right, I'm going to start a company to fill this need?
Yeah, look, I think there are different pieces to it. Both my co-founder and I think, always knew we wanted to eventually be founders. Like we'd worked for startups for a while, but we at some point wanted to be the founders. At some point, we decided we wanted to be founders together, which is like an important step. And then, we came across this problem, and it sits in sort of like, if you think of a 2x2 of problems that everyone understands versus nobody. And
Yeah,
whether
right.
it's like actually like something where the high growth or not, like we were in this interesting place where not only did people not understand it, but everyone told us we were idiots. Like I remember so many companies saying, well, hey, why would you talk to your customer? And I go, well, okay, you're not in an industry where this matters. Because then you go talk to insurance and healthcare and education. They go, please, we want to talk to our customer more. So that's one important thing. But not only was it something that was counterintuitive, we were right. It was a market that was growing quickly, and we could really have a big impact. So I think, those earned secrets, as sometimes venture capitalists call it, are important for sure. And, then you take a leap. Like you don't know that it's going to be real or not until you really start doing it. The advice I give people these days is everyone wants to go raise VC dollars. And I basically say, don't raise any money until you've convinced yourself it's a real business. And if that means hiring fewer people, or that means funding yourself for a while, do that. Because the second you raise VC dollars, like you're stuck for at least 2 years. And you don't want to be stuck if you like 3 months later figure out it's not really a business. So, what we did is we took some time, really dug into it, made sure we talked to 100, 200 customers, saw where the need really was, and then, yeah, got going and, raised some money.
Were you both working at Angie's List at the time?
Yeah, we've worked together for a long time.
And so what was kind of the decision day? It's like, okay, we can quit our jobs because we have something here.
Yeah, look, you sort of referenced it obliquely in your intro, but I don't think like I was having that. Either of us were having that much fun at a big company. And to some extent, life is short. You gotta go do what you want. And we just like being in these earlier stages where every rock you overturn, there's opportunity. And you're not managing to improve some tiny metric. Like there's huge things in front of you could do better. And you feel like, if you don't come in tomorrow, like it's not gonna happen. And like that's a fun feeling, for us. Yeah, I think depends on who you are. Like some people don't want that, and then definitely don't go into the journey. We also went into it like heads up, knowing that it would be a roller coaster. There'd be great days and there'd be terrible days, and it's the people who persevere through it all and keep moving forward that ultimately win. So I think when I talk to VCs these days, or we're lucky enough to have gotten a little further than like the very beginning, the number of people that don't reach, a couple $1 million in revenue, like that's the large, 90+% of people that don't get there. And a lot of it is not because they don't have the capabilities. It's because they don't have that grit, that determination, that when something goes against them, they don't like just, knock down walls until like they get to the solution.
So did you start building it and kind of mapping it out before you even had left your jobs?
Not really. I mean, we knew pretty clearly what we thought the hypothesis was. We thought by using customer data to drive personalization, you could have better outcomes in this sort of programmatic outreach. And we'd seen that story play out in marketing tools, so we knew kind of what kind of things we'd have to build. But we didn't start anything till after. In fact, like when we raised money, we didn't have a product. When we sold the first customers, we didn't have a product. We literally were showing them, screenshots in a
Right.
PowerPoint because that was a great way of iterating very quickly and getting feedback. I think one of the mistakes people make early is they spend a year building an MVP. Don't just
Right.
spend a day making a mock-up and show it to people. You get the same level of feedback. And if the person says they want to buy, okay, tell them to hold their horses. If it's something valuable enough to them, they'll wait the 3 months till you build your MVP. And that way, at least you know which of the features to build first and how to build them. Because otherwise, you build the things for a year and then you get feedback and you have to rebuild it anyway because you got it wrong the first time.
Yeah, I totally applaud you for that because I couldn't agree more. It's like get, the what do they call it? Minimum viable, right? Idea out there and just go, hey, if we built this, would you be interested in buying it?
Yeah, and
And
what
what else
happens,
would you add,
yeah,
right?
very early, you have this dream of like this product you're gonna build, and it's like 20 slides long in your deck. And what ends up happening is one of the slides, if you're lucky, people go, that one feature, I like, they take you, I won't, and if you're lucky, that happens. And you end up spending years building that one slide of your 20 slide deck. And like very few people ever get to build out the 20 slides. Some people do, but like that's a very big company then. So I think that's what you're looking for is not how do I build out the full vision I originally had, but what is that thing that just makes people pull you across the table and say, here, take my money now.
Yes, exactly. Love that. So, did you just reach out to your own network in the very beginning or like in the early days? Who were you talking to and how did you decide who to talk to?
Sure, we try to avoid our direct network. So we find that the best is sort of 1 degree removed. And the reason for that is when you go to your direct network, they're always going to be nice to you. They're always going to say, oh, it's so great, Alex. And maybe even they'll give you money, which is like even more like pulling the wool over your eyes. Sometimes I call this the YC problem in that, why a lot of YC founders sell to other YC founders. And every
Yeah.
other YC company is taught to buy the products from their cohort, but you end up then building for somebody who doesn't even really want your product and maybe is not the right customer type because they're all these very small startups with specific needs. So you're much better off going to your friends and using them to get a 1 degree removed intro who's going to be honest with you and not going to shine you on. And at the very early days, we intentionally went a lot of across different industries, different customer types, different roles within the company to start understanding what people wanted. We didn't need the one ideal ICP day one. We needed to know how different people reacted to what we were doing. And now, whatever later, we've got a very refined ICP where we think there is the most opportunity.
Yeah. That is so smart to move into that broad at first and because of their feedback, you could narrow, narrow, narrow,
Right.
right? So I think that is absolutely a great way to go about it. All right, so you got your first customers before the product was even finished, right? Which is awesome.
Yeah.
And then, of course, they started trying it, and I'm sure you made some tweaks and stuff. When was the moment where you guys said, "All right, full force now. Let's go out and just get a big audience. We know who we're after now. We've got our ICP a little bit more narrowed down. We're going to really go start selling." Because I know
Yeah.
you were doing all the selling yourself in the beginning. So tell us about that point and what happened then.
Yeah, some of this is so contextual. When we started selling was right during COVID when
Mm,
everything was shifting from in-person online. And, if you look at actually all the contact center software, the public companies, their revenue started growing more quickly because people were trying to smooth
right.
contact center software into the cloud. And it pulled forward a lot of deals. So I sold the first 3 million in AR, but it was a great time to sell because people were pulling, for that kind of software. Um, I'd say two learnings from that period. One is I think where there were opportunities for me to price higher, I did, which was valuable, I suppose, and that I learned things, but probably long term was a mistake because it would have been better to just underprice and sign a contract that every year increased a bit in price.
Oh,
Instead,
gotcha.
what happened is there were some customers from those days where I overpriced them, and we realized that now in the ongoing, that's not the price we want to be at, and so we've had to or not had to, but we've chosen to reduce those prices for those customers, which hurts your revenue. So I'd say early days, better to underprice than overprice. So that was one mistake. The other mistake I'd say was I didn't, because it was all working well when I was selling, like I didn't look to bring anybody else on till 3 million. I should have. And what I recommend people do now is bring on like a junior AE or BDR plus, I sometimes call it, who's going to, shadow everything you do, write all your emails for you. And in weeks where like I'm focused on something else, still do outreach. So I think like, you know, I think it would have helped me do more on weeks where I wasn't doing it, and would have helped me start to formalize or make formulaic what I was doing. And I didn't. And so then finally I hired a VP who was kind of a mid-market, very transactional VP. And we started hiring a team around that mid-market motion and got that going. I think we were too slow to understand that as the market shifted into a world where people were more cost conscious, it was becoming more of a enterprise sale or relationship based sale. And the VP we had wasn't the right VP for that. And so we ultimately did recognize it and switched to a VP who was more sort of used to relationship selling and has taught the team how to make that shift. But I think we were a bit slow to realize that, or to act on it at least, even if we realized it. And now even like within the team, shifting from a more complex mid-market motion to, contracts that are millions of dollars a year and a more enterprise motion is another whole learning motion. So I think, yeah, as we've gone through it, like we've slowly started to get better at being more formulaic about how we do this repeatably. Our industry is one that's tough, right? Still 60-70% of contact center software is on-prem, not even in the cloud. So when we're coming and saying, we're not only in the cloud, we're a cool new cloud thing, they're going, we're still on-prem. Like we have to do the first step. So like you can skip for sure, but I use it as an indication of how sticky the products in our space are. So getting distribution is the challenge, even if our product is better. And so I think it's not the type of product that you just sort of pour dollars endlessly into and everybody buys it. It's the type of product where you need to make sure you have a go-to-market motion that builds a lot of trust with your customers, because they're having to remove the software that's helping their contact center serve their millions of customers for a new one, which is a big risk for them.
It's truly a rip and replace. And that is always hard, right? With the change. But you guys have done remarkable things in 3 years. You've grown really quickly, and especially considering that you were really the only seller. And I love that you recognize, because I've talked to a lot of CEOs about this, that in the early days, having that sales coordinator, sales assistant, junior BDR, whatever you want to call
Yeah.
it, right, is really crucial. And I think we make the mistake as founders too early on. I just need to get somebody else out there selling because I just can't do it all. And there's so much market to have, right?
Yeah.
But then we don't necessarily set them up for success. Whereas what you did, maybe not soon enough, but you did, was get someone to shadow you, see what you're doing, figure out how you're doing it. And
Yeah.
then I even say, get them to record everything, write it down. And they are really building your playbook then as they go, because they're following you around and seeing how you're having success, understanding what the processes are, and being able to duplicate then that after a time. But they've got it documented, right? So that then as you grow, you can use that information and keep improving it, which I love.
Mm.
And that interesting that you said you hired a VP who at the time, could manage the type of sale that you had, but then very quickly you recognized, oh my gosh, this is a different sale than even we thought.
Mm.
And we're going to need to do things a bit differently. So that's, and in 3 short years, I mean, that's pretty amazing that you've done that.
Yeah,
And of course,
we were lucky. Like we went in the first year, we went from 0 to 3 million in AR, and the second year from 3 to 9 million in AR. So like the business grew pretty quickly. But like I say, still we could have reacted more quickly to the changes in this. And I'd say for me, coming from organizations that were not majority B2B sales. So like I'd done some B2B sales, but the past companies were B2C. I didn't recognize how much of it was dictated by the personnel, I think. So, yes, of course, people are flexible and they can do different things, but so much of people's worldview is based on what they've done, right? The expression, to somebody with a hammer, everything looks like a nail comes to mind. It's not that they might not have other tools in their tool belt. It's just when they're looking at it, they keep going back to hey, like that's another nail, instead of thinking maybe there's a different motion. I have, I think like I have utmost respect for sales leaders that are able to go across different types of sales motions flexibly. It's very hard to do.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Now, you have about 30 sellers right now. So tell us a little bit about what the structure is. So you went from having one yourself and then one person shadowing you to 30 again in a very short period of time. So how did that happen? I know you hired that sales VP. They probably started hiring some people and then you've made some changes, but tell us what that org structure looks like and how you got to where you are right now with that.
Sure. So largely, we wanted to go direct at the beginning and stay in mid-market because we didn't want to sort of lose control of the sales process or have some customer that was so big we'd be beholden to them. And over time, as that process, got bigger, obviously we hired more AEs, more BDRs, like in that world. We used to do all the sort of enablement ourselves, and eventually hired a product marketer and enablement people to help with it. I'd say the bigger shifts then came as we started wanting to move up enterprise and sort of starting to hire enterprise AEs was a bit of a shift. And then maybe the biggest shift more recently is starting to hire folks to go into the channel. So instead of being direct, now that we understand our sales motion, we've started building relationships with basically professional services organizations, which are very important in the contact center world, and with technology partners in the contact center world that want to resell our product. And we are now in a good enough place that we're not going to lose control of like who we are, what we're doing if we do this stuff. And that's a whole other set of sellers basically that are going into those sorts of channels to build relationships. And we've now hired, for instance, 2 solutions consultants or pre-sales and sales engineers to help with what is going on. So slowly, I think inevitably what ends up happening is instead of one person doing it all, it gets split into these more segmented roles where you can find people who are experts in those roles, and it's much easier to hire each individual role than one person that does everything. The thing I harp on, I guess, as an outsider perhaps on this is how terrible this can be for the end customer. What I mean by that is for an end customer, what they would prefer is one person that interfaces with them for everything. But what's easier for the company is to have a person in every role that you can manage to specific metrics and hire more easily. If you go too far in that direction, though, that customer ends up having 8 different people that they're working with over their onboarding, like between sales and onboarding, and they can't keep it straight. And how could they keep it straight? So I think, as much as I understand why B2B orgs end up splitting up the roles, I would say like, as much as possible, like try to keep it to fewer people so that, that customer doesn't have that sort of head spinning experience of meeting 8 different people from your company.
Yeah, it can be head splitting for sure. I think if it's positioned properly, these handoffs can be done well. So, what are some of the things that you do at your company to make sure it isn't head splitting for your customers?
Yeah, like I said, we try to at least keep one pre-sales person, the AE always involved, and one post-sales person, the CSM always involved. So there's only one true handoff. Still, there are a lot of other people involved, between the pre-sales consultants, the post-sales implementation people, support people, execs, whatever. But as much as possible, we try to keep it to those 2. And, I do think we attempt to really understand our customers' business. I don't know that we're the best at it yet. I think companies like Attentive in the SMS marketing space did it amazingly well, where they really understood, or what's now called Wonderkin, which used to be Bounce Exchange, again in the marketing space, really understood what metrics their customer was trying to move so that they could come in not just with a product, but with recommendations on how to use the product. That's a difficult thing to do, right? But I think the more you can do that, the better your customer is going to, be able to use your product, the better outcome they're going to have. So that's constantly something on our mind.
Yeah, because we want our customers to be successful using what we sold them, right? So, the better we get
Yeah,
at
at
that.
least we do. Like I can't speak, a lot of companies hand over the software and say, cool, it's yours. Look, and if that works for them and they're big enough and like, that's whatever, that's it. But it's also not why we got into this. Like part of the reason my co-founder and I like this industry is not only are we selling software to, Forward Healthcare, but we can also sit down with the founders of Forward and say, hey, let's think about how you're going to use this to better engage your customer base. So for us, part of the fun is helping design the customer experiences. I'm going to pick on Notion. I always like picking on them. if I wouldn't want to sell Notion, like some tool that's going to be an internal tool that has no ROI, that has no impact on the end customer. Like that's not interesting.
Yeah, and nor is the onboarding or, the experience. It's just, here you go, do it yourself, get on it, right? Watch some of these videos, right? And I really feel that the success of our customers is paramount. And when you as a team can dig in with the other founders and say, let's figure out the best use cases for this. How do we make the experience better for your customers, right? That's sticky, that's valuable. That's what people want. And it's really important that you have the opportunity to continue doing that as a CEO, right? So now that you've got this bigger sales team built and things are humming along and your growth has been really steady, I'd love to hear a little bit about your sales leaders and the things that they do to really make their teams able to perform well.
Yeah, I think the thing I'm worst at in this area that like luckily we've had sales leaders, or we have a sales leader now who's much better at than I am, is making it again formulaic for like those folks. As a founder, especially because I came from this space and literally was the buyer, like it's easy for me to sit down and have a conversation with somebody and take it wherever, and hopefully end up in a good place and get the customer excited about using us. But that's not something that's repeatable. You know, on the other hand, or we have a sales leader who can take that and say, okay, let's break that down into components. Here are the pieces everyone can do. Here's the path I want them to take. Don't go do the thing Alex does where he goes skating on the thin ice. Like that's not a good idea. Maybe it works for him, but like let's not do that. So I think creating a world in which your AEs particularly can thrive is important. I'd say the one thing there where I'd say I've put my thumb on the scale, and I hope a good way for the AEs is I've tried to keep the AE attainment above 100%. I think a lot of organizations try to keep AE attainment at 60, 70%. One, to keep them hungry. Two, to maybe save some money. They think, I'd much rather the AEs be making a lot of money and be very happy and telling people that. I think the challenge is then you're running really lean. And if one leaves, you can put yourself in a bad position if you're running too lean. So there's always a bit of a give and take there, but generally I'd rather the AEs be making quite a bit above their quota.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. I think that makes for happy AEs who want to do their job and want to do it well. And especially if you're giving them some sort of accelerator or kicker when they go over their goal, it's amazing, right? So that makes them very, very happy. So you've got leaders who are really supporting the team and supporting the process, which is important. And I love what you said that don't go do what Alex, because that's Alex and only Alex can do Alex. But here's what you can do that will work and is successful and it's proven. And we've done it over and over again. And we know for a fact. But I also, know that the CEO does have a super important role in sales. Even, okay, you're several years in, you've got a huge sales team, right? And I always say that the CEO will always have a role in sales, but that role changes as the company matures. So where do you see yourself now, and the importance of your role with existing customers and with prospects? And how do your sales leaders and sales teams know when is the right time to bring Alex in to bring a little of that thin ice skating about, or, some of that CEO confidence that may be needed? How do they do that?
So I like being on customer call. Not everybody does, but I do. And I find it helpful every now and again to do it. So I still do demos myself and lead whatever calls and discovery. And I find it's a good way to stay in touch with what's really going on. So still, I'll do that. The A's still get the same commissions. What do they care if I want to lead the discovery? They mostly are pretty happy. In terms of when to bring me in, I think again, we've done an okay job of it, and not just me. I think about whatever exec. I
Yes.
think we've done a pretty good job of it. I think that some A's are more willing to use it than others. I try to encourage it as much as possible, especially as an early stage company, whether it's me or head of product or head of technology or whatever, bring somebody into a deal cycle. It's a great way to show how important that customer is to us and perhaps build an executive relationship that'll last later, into the post sales period where we can then use it. So I encourage it. I think, again, maybe we need to make it a little bit more formulaic now of like, hey, I have a deal of this size. You need to do this thing and have this relationship. We're probably at about a point where we've got to do that, where, every customer above a certain size needs to have an exec sponsor and so on and so forth. Like we're getting there.
Yeah, I definitely do recommend that. And I think, you guys still are early in, like 3 years, but now it sounds like you're about ready to put some formal, guidelines around it. When it looks like this, it tastes
Yeah.
like this and smells like this, bring in, a senior person, right? Or when
Yeah.
this happens, always do these things. And these are the times when we always want the CEO available to do. And this is what we want the CEO to do. And these are times, like you said, when we need an executive sponsor. And I think one of the great ways to get started doing that is to look at your existing customer base and make some decisions around, wow, these 5 need an executive sponsor. These 3 need our CEO. This is the, cadence with which we'll have these conversations where the CEO or the executive sponsor is involved, and
Yeah.
just get a little bit more parameters around it. And that way, maybe some of the reluctant sellers will start to really tune in and use, their senior executives better. And of course, we know that does close more deals and makes them stickier. And like you said, then after the close, right? Now we can do the land and expand, right? So now we can start expanding because we have those senior executives who know how to talk to each other about making this more than just buying something, but making the company successful with what they bought and sharing ideas that can make improvements for everyone.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah. Well, good. All right. Well, gosh, you've shared so much with us, and I really appreciate it. I'm excited to continue watching your company grow because you're doing so many great things. But before we part ways today, I wanted to ask you a couple of questions to give the audience some ideas of some of the things that you do to stay on top of your game. So, the first question is, what is a book that you think every CEO should read?
Yeah, I mean, I'll recommend one that I'm sure you hear a lot, which is Start With Why. I do think, especially I find it's easy for me to like jump in and start talking about the details. And if I haven't started with, where we're trying to go, like people, I think end up doing things that I don't think is what I wanted originally. But, if I hear what I was saying, like I can understand how people ended up there. And so, remembering always to start with why, I think, and where you're trying to go is a good sort of, starting place.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a favorite for sure. And then another question, what is a podcast that you love because it makes you think differently?
Yeah, so we talked about this before. I don't actually listen to that many podcasts. My co-founder does. She swears by, I think it's called Equity, which is the TechCrunch podcast, and there's other great ones out there. But honestly, like I read more. I
Mm,
haven't spent, so if there are transcripts of podcasts, I'll like read through them, but I actually don't sit and watch or listen to the podcast as much.
yeah, understandable. And when we're busy, we have to pick and choose. We can't do everything, right?
Yeah.
All right. So last question, what does every CEO need to know to win in this marketplace?
Look, again, I'll say something which I'm sure you hear. Like every company's CFO is telling them, "Go and save money. Go and save money. Do you really need this?" So just be ready for that. In a world where, again, I'll pick on Notion, your Notion, and there's no ROI, and it's unclear why you're using this product. Like it's going to be hard to keep that product in the company. On the other hand, like if you are an ROI driven product, great, you have a great case, but make sure you understand what the competitive dynamic is and who else they could look at, so that as they're evaluating you versus the other, what that comparison is going to be. I'd say where we do this well, we make sure we're coming into those conversations and saying, here's how we look versus the competition and why it's worth paying more for us because you're getting this value. Where we do it badly, the customer comes in and goes, well, you're basically contact center software. I found this player. They might be SMB. They might not have your features, but they're $15 a month. So we're going to either you charge us $15 a month or we're going to switch to them. Okay, well, so now we've done a shitty job because like we haven't shown them why we're different. We haven't shown the value we're adding, and they clearly, assuming they're not just being facetious, like believe that they could get the same things out of that other product at the lower price. So, just be ready to go into every conversation, comparing yourself to what else exists in the market.
Yeah, really bringing that value. Like, this is the value that we bring and why it's worth paying.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, gosh, thank you so much for being on the show today, Alex. I really appreciate it. And if people want to get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to do that?
So please always go take a look at our website, regal.io. You can email me at hello@regal.io. Particularly, I'd say if you are big enough to have a contact center and you're in an industry where it matters to reach out to your customers, happy to chat about different strategies, and show you what's possible with sort of the most modern software today.
Awesome. And if you do look Alex up on LinkedIn and decide to try to connect with him, remember that you have to say that you heard him here on my show, or he's not going to accept your connection request. Thank you again, Alex. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed the show, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week.